Hello and welcome to Transform Tuesday. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I'm joined today by Sarah Mitchell, head of our documentation department. Today we don't have a terribly long time to spend on today's topic, but it has to do with time and specifically how to do date and time calculations. So last week, we showed a dashboard, and that dashboard had, and it was a daily dashboard, and there was a user input that we set up on that dashboard at the top that allowed someone to select a particular date from a calendar and then show only records from that date were being reflected in that dashboard. And there were a couple tricks to setting that up, and I said that I thought it would be good to have a separate topic devoted just to the date time functions that you can use in TPL and with your dashboards. So let's get started. But before we get started, Sarah, just a quick process check. Can you see my screen and can you hear me?
Yes, on both accounts.
Excellent. Thanks very much. All right, so let's take a look at the date and time functions. You will find these in documentation, alphasoftware.com, transform documentation. And you want to do a search for TPL overview. This is where you'll find it in the TPL overview section. There are about a dozen date and time functions that you have access to. And some of the more interesting ones are date difference, which will tell you the difference between two dates. Is it 2 days apart, a week apart, a year apart, a minute apart, because these are date time functions. GMT offset just tells you how far you are from Greenwich Mean Time. You may or may not use this depending on how much you're going to be working with multiple time zone data. Date from format is sort of an interesting one, and it pairs here with date plain. What it lets you do is take a date in sort of a non-standard format and turn it into a standard format. Date plain, which is actually particularly interesting because you can give it all kinds of input and it kind of works out what the thing is that it's supposed to do. For example, if you said 30-August/2022, it would turn it properly into 2021 and then August 08 and then -30. You could also give it 30 AUG. You could give it a few other things. It doesn't know the difference between, what you can't give it though is a European time format. I tried that already. It can't tell the difference. So it does assume that if you're just putting slashes in between things, that we use that strange American date format of month, day, year, as opposed to day, month, year. But that you can handle that as well in your code. I'm not positive where you would use these two functions. To me, they make more sense if you're importing data. I could see them being used in TPL. If you're importing data from a format that isn't a standard format and you want to create a field that then translates itself into the standard date time field. Other ones we have are date same, which compares two dates based on a scope. And that's sort of interesting because dates can have, you can say, for example, let me know if this happened in the same month or in the same week or in the same day. And that's great when you're doing comparisons between two date time fields. And often you're not actually interested in the time portion of it. So, for example, if something happened at August 3rd at 9 a.m. versus August 3rd at noon, you'd still consider that to be the same day, even though the two strings look different because they're encoded with different dates at the end of it. And then we have date-friendly and date-to-friendly and date-to-friendly difference. This will give you things like Friday or today or 2 days ago. And I will give you an example of how that is used. And then date to format is one that you'll probably use pretty often because it'll take our sort of ugly dates that you get in Transform, the ones that go year, month, day with hyphens in between, and turn it into something that's a little bit more readable. So let's go take a look at these in action. I'm going to pop over here to Safari. Sorry, I'm going to pop over here. I meant to Transform Central and take a look at our dashboard. And this is a dashboard that's similar to the one that you saw last week when I put these together. And if you remember at the time, this was a little bit different. It said daily report for, and then the format, oops, I keep doing that. I keep clicking that. The format was in the year, month, date format. It wasn't in this friendly format. So I actually formatted that date. The other thing I did was I didn't actually really have this hooked up properly last time. I had it hard coded to a particular date, but I've actually made that work. It was very easy. So if I choose now a different date, let's say the 20th of August, and then go ahead and refresh the screen, you will see that I've got different data for that day. So let's take a look up here at the very top of the screen and see how we put this together. So this, as you recall, is an input, and this input was a date input. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this dashboard. And I called the input name date, not a very original name, but descriptive. And I gave it an input type of date as opposed to date time. I wasn't interested in seeing minute by minute or second by second what the data was. I was interested in the data for an entire day. So it only made sense to choose a particular day. The problem is, if you'll take a look at, these are the created, but the other dates that I have in here, which are the call time and the schedule time and the service date, which are here in this filter. Okay. Whoops. Looks like I messed this up. But anyway, what you're going to do is you'll take what we do when we're comparing these two types of dates. So I've got a field from my diagnose and repair form, and that field is called scheduled time. Now, scheduled time is down here in my list of fields. Scheduled time is a date time field. So if I tried to compare it against a date field, there wouldn't be a match because there's no specific time. It's looking for an exact match. So instead of doing equals here, when I'm doing my test, I chose starts with. And that's the secret when you are comparing a date field to a date time field. You want to use the starts with. So my scheduled time, which has got the date at the beginning of it, right? And then the time stuff at the end of it, just needs to match the first part of my date. Hopefully I've explained that in a way that made sense. Once I set that up, schedule time starts with that. Actually, I can remove this. This doesn't make sense here. That's all I needed to do to make that work. Let me just save that. All right, so that's how I got this to work with the filtering. So how did I make this a friendly format? Well, let me show you if I keep remembering not to click that. I'm going to click on here. I'm going to click Edit Tile. And then I'm going to take a look at my template. So what I did with my template was, here's the stuff here. It's my template text. It's just HTML. So I wrote the words daily report. And then by using the curly braces, I was able to insert some TPL to perform a calculation or to give me output using TPL. And I used the date to format function. Now the date to format function takes two things. It takes an input and it takes the format that you would like the data back in. So the input in this case was my user input, dashboard user inputs.date. And as I pointed out, you could find out this syntax if you go over into the help over here while you're on dashboards. You can scroll down and it'll show you all the different kind of things that you can access. So that's how you get to the dashboard inputs. It's just $dash.dashboard inputs dot the name of the input that we created here. The second part was this formatting string. And I'm going to show you documentation on this in a minute. But what this lets you do is it lets you specify how you'd like it to come out. So by typing in the word month here, it knew that I should insert the month. By putting the letter D, it knew that I wanted the day number. And by putting in this 4-digit, and I only wanted 1 digit reserved for day. Now it'll spill over to 2 if it needs to. But what I didn't want is to have something like OG 02 2022. So I used just 1 letter there. And then 4 letters for the template for the year. And that's how I got that. There are some fun things you can do, and actually we'll play with this in the template tester, but I'll just show you this here right here. Is, for example, if I changed month spelled out to MON, and I click off here, it's going to change it, you'll see, to the abbreviated version of the month. So let me cancel out. All right, so let's go over into the template tester and take a look at a couple of these functions. And then I'm going to show you 2 new tiles that I've created that do some date calculations. So let's pop over here to save our dashboard. We'll go to designer, grab our diagnose and repair form, and we will actually, let's go here to test time map. Doesn't really matter because I'm just using the tester. All right, so we're going to go over here into the tester. For those of you who are unfamiliar, there is a built-in tester in the dashboard, which allows you to enter in TPL commands and see on a line and see what happens. Sort of an interactive view of TPL. So like if I said 1 + 1 + 1, for example, I get a result of 2 because that's what you would get back in TPL. But we're going to instead use some date formats. So let me pop back over here to PowerPoint, and I'm going to escape out and just grab one of these. Let's grab, this is a great one, date difference. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the documentation right now. Okay, back here. And I'm going to go over to, okay, so here's the documentation. I'm going to paste this link to the documentation page here. Okay, so that's in the chat window if you want to pick that up. So when you get to this page, by the way, the easiest way to find the functions is to go down to built-in functions. This is when you get to the transform programming overview. So we're going to pop down to built-in functions, and all the date time functions are kept together under the name date. So we just have to scroll down to the Ds. All right, here we go, the Ds. And now here is a good example. Let's take a look at date difference. I'm going to grab that expression here. Copy that. Back to transform, paste that in. And now when I hit execute, you're probably going to say, oh, it's going to give you something back that I can see. Nope, you're wrong. And here's why. Date difference doesn't give you back a value or a string. It gives you back an object. And that object has properties. And the properties of those objects is actually determined by one of the parameters. So because I've told it that I want to know the date difference in these dates, and I want it expressed in weeks and in days, I'm going to get back two properties. One's called weeks, one's called days. So I'm going to type in weeks. I'm going to click execute. And it's going to tell me that there's 4 weeks difference between those two. And now I'm going to say days. And it's going to say 3. So that means 4 weeks and 3 days, right? What if I just wanted to know the total number of days without the number of weeks? Well, I just have to say days here in this string. Oops, days. Execute that. And that tells us it was 31 days that have elapsed between these two dates. Okay, so that's kind of interesting how we use that, but let me show you a practical example of how we use the date difference. Well, by the way, days, besides days and weeks, you can also use months and years, as you might expect. All right, so let's go back here, and we're going to go back to the dashboard. And here I've created 2 new tiles. This one's called number of days until appointment. So what we did was we calculated when did this, so again, this example is for a fictitious service company that works on HVAC equipment. So imagine a customer calls in and then they make an appointment. The question is, how many days are it between the appointment and the day that they called in? So, you know, if they're lucky, maybe they can get an appointment just 2 days away. If you're not so lucky, maybe it's 12 days away. So what we did was we pointed out how long each person on this day, this is the day of their appointment, how long they had to wait before that appointment. So this is a pretty extreme case, 13 days. I don't know why I clicked on it, but it shows you the record if you must see it. Oops. We're going to trap that back button, by the way. So that was one. And here's another tile, and this tells them how many minutes late was the service person. In other words, if they said they were going to come at 12 o'clock, you know, what time did they show up? Did they show up at 12:08, 12:12, 12:15? This particular company is remarkably on time, at least based on my experience. But of course, this is all randomly generated data. Let me show you how these tiles were put together. I'm going to go ahead here into the menu, and I'm going to click Edit Tile. And this was a list type of tile. So with a list type of tile, you specify a template, and the template is done in HTML. But again, you use the curly brackets when you want to include fields or any other TPL expression. So here I've added the contact name. That is the name of the person for whom is getting the service call. And then I said, what I'm interested in is the date different in days. So what I did was I specified the days as my parameter, like I showed you there in the tester. And then I used schedule time. That's the time that they are supposed to be, or the service person is supposed to arrive. And call time, that's the time that they actually arrived. Or actually, I'm sorry, I'm taking that back. In this particular example, scheduled time is the time that they actually arrived, but call time is the time that they called in on the phone or whatever to book their appointment. So I want to know what the difference is that in days. So I put that in and I use .days to get the days property of that object that came back. And then afterwards, I just wrote the word days so that days would appear next to it. So what we get is that calculation and then the word days. All right, so let's pop down to customer wait time. Pretty similar concept. All we've done this time is we have used minutes instead as our parameter. So that means we needed to use .minutes as the property for our object. And we compare two different dates. This was the scheduled time, the time they were supposed to be there. And this is the service date, which is really a service date time field. I just gave it a weird name, sorry. But that is the time that they actually arrived. And then at the end, we just put in minutes late into that. All right, so that is how I put that one together, and you'll see it performed the calculation. One other thing I did to these lists, which I haven't shown you before, it's not actually time related, but is I decided to order them so that I would put all of the customers in order alphabetically and all of the service texts here in order alphabetically. The way I did that, only because I've never shown it before, is I just went over to sort order. And in this case, I chose the person field to sort on. That's the person to whom the ticket was assigned. It's people here. And I told it up or down. In the case of here, because I was going against, when I was filtering against a field that was contained, that's weird. I clicked the wrong thing, edit tile. I did click the wrong thing, okay. Because I went against a field, oh, I thought I had, maybe I didn't, maybe I haven't formatted these. Anyway, if I wanted to do filtering here, I could say plus, and I could say choose this particular form. And now that I can choose a field from that form here in the fields list. And in this case, I could choose contact name. And then that is just needs to be, oh, I'm sorry, I've been filtering. That's what I'm doing wrong. Duh. Pardon me, I need to edit this out. Anyway, over here in sort order is where I meant to be. And this is what I was going to show you. Over here in sort order, I chose contact name as the field in which to order. So I'm going to cancel out of here. So that's basically all you do. It's very similar to setting up a filter. It is setting up the sort. All right, so let's go quickly review. Oh, and the other thing I want to show you was friendly date. Let me show that to you in the tester. So we're going to do let's go back to the documentation page. We could do, let's do date friendly difference. Date or date to friendly actually is fine. This is a fun one to play around with. Let me grab an example here. Actually, here's a parameter. Let's grab that one. Okay. Set in here. Execute. There we go. So you'll see what this has done is taking some parameters as you give it a date, or you can give it a date time, and using parameters, it gives you back a friendly date, Monday, the 12th of November. But it could also say, like, let's say we made it today, 2021, August 3rd. Let's execute that. You'll see it says today. And if we had it for the 4th, it says tomorrow. So this is kind of cool when it shows up on a list, but it's not something that I'd want to have up here. I mean, it would make sense to say daily report for today, especially if you're going to print it out and make a copy of it. But it is kind of a nice thing that you could use in a list, and it was a function that I just want to make sure that you saw. All right, so I think I've shown you everything I want to show you, which is how to compare date fields, how to show a formatted date, how to show a friendly date, how to calculate the difference between dates, and how to compare a date field with a date time field like we did up here using the starts with. Are there any questions today about date and time? If there are, we'll answer them, and if not, it's time to go. Doesn't look like it. All right, wonderful. Hey, thanks everyone for showing up. Thank you, Sarah, for being here. I am going to be out on summer break, so I'm not going to be doing webinars for Transform Tuesday for the next 2 Tuesdays. However, in the meantime, our TF service hotline is always staffed. You can send an email to tfservice@alphasoftware.com for any questions that you have on Transform. Thanks very much for joining us today. I will see you in a couple of weeks. Take care. Bye-bye.